everyone. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to follow up that heartfelt talk there. Thank you so much for sharing. My name's Serpil Senelmis. I'm a Turkish Australian. I am a Victorian. I was born in Shepparton, and I'm quite happily straddling two cultures. I have done so all my life. I'm quite happy to smash a meat pie and a dolma on the same plate. So that's me in a nutshell. When I say I straddle two cultures though, it goes deeper than that, because when you think about Turkey, where the geography of Turkey is, it straddles Asia, it straddles Europe, and also straddles the Middle East. So I'm covering a lot of bases there. So, you know, in recent times I have been used to the terrorist stereotype, for instance. My parents came out here in 1969. The first Turks came to Australia in 1968 from mainland Turkey. Before that, there were the Cypriot Turks, but if we just stick to the mainland Turks, it was because the Australian government was starting to relax on the White Australia policy, because all the other wogs that they had working, like the Italians and the Greeks, the economy in Europe was doing much better. So they all went, we've made enough money, we're going back home. So the Australian government went, oh, who else can we get here to work for us? And that's where the Turks stepped up. They were the next generation of migrants that were skilled workers, and that's how we ended up in Australia. That's how my family came here. But I don't want to talk to you about my background. I want to talk to you about something that's coming up that we're all really familiar with, Anzac Day. Now, why do I want to talk about this? Because the topic is perspectives. When we think about Anzac Day and how we commemorate Anzac Day every year, it's a really sensitive topic, right? So you have to be very respectful about how you talk about it. People are very passionate about Anzac Day. You can't say the wrong thing. We've got a long history of commemorating it. We talk about our heroes. We talk about the loss, the suffering, how it shaped Australia. We include the New Zealand perspective. We see the haka every year when it's being commemorated. Now, I had the privilege of covering the centenary for the ABC in 2016. So I was there on the ground in Gallipoli collecting reports on the Australian perspective, on the New Zealand perspective. And then it occurred to me that in all the years that we've commemorated, in all the years that the Turks have been in Australia, we've never heard the Turkish perspective. So I wanted to get that across. I wanted to see why we weren't telling those stories. And I went to Bigala, which is where the headquarters of Atatürk was, who is the founder of modern day Turkey. And I found the children of veterans, and I spoke to them, and I got their stories, and I discovered that there's so much commonality between what the Australians went through and what the Turks went through. And I really wanted to share that hurt and loss and how it had created deep scars in a community that we don't hear about. I spoke to the grandson of a veteran who told me that his grandfather was the only survivor in his regiment, and the rest of them had been buried under a mudslide and had died from dysentery, and he had to pretend to be dead for a number of days before he could crawl out of there. He told me how the entire town had been evacuated, how there'd been basically a whole generation of intelligent people had been lost, and it took years and years for the country to recover. And I wondered why we didn't tell these stories in Australia. And we still don't. We commemorate Anzac Day every year. It's a huge part of our identity. But I feel like we're at that point in our history where we should open that story to be able to share how it impacted on the Turks as well. We talk about the friendship we've forged with Turkey over the years, but we don't talk about the impact it's had on the people there and the intergenerational trauma that it's created for Turks. And how that's also impacted our relationship with Turks who live in Australia as well. The older Turks tell me when they arrived here, even though their skills were required, when they told their factory mate that they were of Turkish origin, suddenly they would stop having lunch with them in the lunchroom, or they weren't welcome on the streets on Anzac Day. So next time you think about Anzac Day, maybe think about the Turkish perspective. Think about opening the dialogue. Think about it was something that affected beyond just our small community. And maybe we can sort of flip it on its head and broaden the conversation that we have. So that's all I want to add.